My name is Marley, and I'm 28. I grew up believing weddings were about love until my family taught me they were about control, and that lesson hit hardest the day I got engaged and my parents turned what should have been joy into a ledger of obedience. My parents spent $127,000 on my brother's wedding, and everyone in our circle still talks about it like a myth. Crystal, chandeliers shipped from Italy, a string quartet flown in from Prague, a guest list swollen with people my brother barely knew but my father wanted to impress. I smiled through it all, helped pick linens, swallowed the quiet envy, and told myself my turn would come. When it was my turn to get married, Dad gave me an ultimatum. Follow my rules or pay yourself. Those words landed like a stamp on my chest, cold and final. Because the rules weren't small, they were a full rewrite of my life. A venue chosen for prestige, not meaning. A guest list packed with donors and partners. A sermon I didn't believe in. A dress approved by committee. And a timeline that fit their calendar, not ours. I chose myself, but that choice didn't feel brave at first. It felt like standing in an empty room after the music stops. I told them we'd pay for our own wedding. That I wanted something honest. That love didn't need a price tag. And the silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. My mother's eyes went glassy, my father's jaw set, and the message was clear. Independence came with a penalty. They called it being practical, but it sounded like punishment. I went home and cried in the shower so my fiancé wouldn't hear. Because the grief wasn't about money. It was about realizing their generosity had always been conditional. Weeks passed, and the planning began without them. And with each small decision, choosing a local garden over a ballroom, deciding on food that tasted like our Sundays instead of a menu designed to brag, I felt both lighter and lonelier. Then came the guest list. The thing I hadn't expected to matter so much. The simple spreadsheet that told the truth I'd been avoiding. I didn't invite people to perform status. I invited people who showed up. The mentor who gave me my first chance when I was broke. The neighbor who brought soup when I was sick. The cousin who defended me when I came out with my boundaries. The co-workers who became family during long nights. The friends who knew my laugh before my last name. It was smaller, warmer, unmistakably mine. When my parents finally asked to see it, curiosity edged with suspicion, I hesitated, because I knew what the list would reveal. They scanned the names, brows knitting, then tightening, and the room changed. These weren't the faces they expected to see reflected back at them. These were the people who knew me outside their shadow, people who loved me without leverage. My father cleared his throat and asked where the big names were, the partners, the distant relatives with influence. And I answered honestly they weren't coming. I watched. The realization ripple, slow, reluctant, that the center of my life didn't orbit their approval anymore. That's when the sentence I'd rehearsed in my head finally found air. I chose myself. I said it calmly, not to wound them, but to anchor myself. Because choosing myself meant choosing a marriage that wouldn't start with a debt of obedience. The pushback came fast, sharp comments about tradition and sacrifice, about how much they'd done, about how ungrateful independence sounded. But underneath it I heard fear, the fear of being left behind by a daughter they'd trained to comply. I didn't argue. I let the guest list sit between us like evidence, because paper doesn't shout, it just tells the truth. They left without hugging me, and that night I lay awake wondering if love could be renegotiated or if it had to be rebuilt entirely. The next morning I woke up steadier, because even in the ache there was clarity. The wedding would be ours, the vows unbargained, the joy unowned by anyone else. I didn't know yet how my parents would respond, or if they would, but I knew this much. The moment they read those names, they finally understood what they'd lost. Not access to a party, but access to the woman I'd become. After my parents saw my guest list, the distance between us didn't close. It clarified. Days passed with no calls, no messages, just a heavy quiet that felt intentional, like they were waiting for me to blink first and come back asking for permission. I didn't. Instead, I kept planning, kept choosing, kept reminding myself why I said yes to the man I was marrying and no to the conditions that came with their money. Then one evening, my father called and asked if we could talk. His voice was careful, measured. the way it gets when he's trying to stay in control of a situation already slipping. They came over, sat at my kitchen table, the same table where my fiancé and I planned our future with sticky notes and cheap takeout, and for the first time, they looked out of place. My dad started by repeating it, as if saying it again might change the outcome. "We spent $127,000 on your brother's wedding." I nodded. I knew the number by heart. He waited for me to flinch. I didn't. He followed with the line that had become a threat and a dare all at once. "When it was your turn to get married, I gave you an ultimatum. Follow my rules or pay yourself." I told him I remembered. Then I said it again, steady and clear. I chose myself. The room went quiet and something shifted, because this time I wasn't asking them to understand. I was stating a fact. My mother reached for the guest list again, pointing at names she didn't recognize, asking who they were and why they mattered. I told her stories instead of titles. I told her who held my hand when I failed, who believed in me when I didn't, who celebrated me without expecting anything back. With every story, their posture changed. The power they'd always held, money, reputation, obligation, had no grip on these people. That's when my father finally said it, softer than I expected. "You didn't invite us into this part of your life." I looked at him and answered the truth he hadn't wanted before. "You never asked to be there without rules." It wasn't cruel. It was honest. And honesty has a way of cutting through defenses faster than anger ever could. They left that night without a fight, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I'd lost something. I felt like I'd drawn a boundary and stood behind it. The weeks that followed were peaceful. The wedding came together simply. Flowers from a local grower. Music chosen for meaning. Vows written with trembling hands and open hearts. On the morning of the ceremony, I didn't check my phone for approval. I looked at my reflection and saw someone who hadn't sold herself for comfort. Then, an hour before guests arrived, my parents showed up. No entourage, no demands, just them. My father didn't mention money. My mother didn't ask to change anything. They took their seats quietly, and when I walked down the aisle, I saw something new in their eyes, not pride the way it used to look, but recognition. The ceremony wasn't lavish, but it was full. Every seat was someone who knew my story, who had earned their place by love, not leverage. During the reception, my father approached me, glass in hand, and said words I never expected to hear. I thought control was love. I was wrong. It didn't erase the past, but it opened a door. That night, as the lights dimmed and laughter carried into the dark, I realized something powerful. When they saw my guest list, they finally understood what they'd lost, and what they could still regain if they changed. I didn't need their money to validate my marriage, and I didn't need their rules to define my worth. I paid for my wedding myself, yes, but I paid with courage, and the return was freedom. If you're watching this and you've ever been given an ultimatum disguised as love, remember this: choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. And sometimes, the moment you stop performing for approval is the moment others finally see you clearly. If this story hit home for you, if you believe in self-respect, quiet strength, and stories where dignity wins,